I'm sick of the sight of you, and we are still only on your first best-worst argument. And not because they are the most insufferably irritating and uninteresting person on the planet.
I'm not an atheist.
Is it because you don't know how to do a video properly? I want it to be because they saw me naked, and I am just that attractive.
Used in this world, such as mathematics, logic, abstract conceptual entities, they all presume what are called transcendental categories. Right? They rely on things that are not known or proven through mere sense experience.
Things that are harder to pin down where they come from, per se, like mathematical laws or morality, must have come from God because we don't know where it came from.
So we can think about things like the past. We can think about things like objects having identity over time. We could think about things like the transcendental unity of a self.
Classic God of the gaps thing? We can't necessarily explain X, therefore Y. Just because I can't explain who keeps drinking all of my whiskey doesn't mean that there is an invisible whiskey drinking ghost who can consume it through walls.
Time and space. Okay, now this is a transcendental category that you cannot empirically verify. And don't give me the low IQ reply of, well, I have a watch. Your watch is not the same thing as time itself. Time itself is some kind of abstract category. Doesn't matter what you want to define it as. Point is that it's not proven to exist merely by empirical investigation. Yes, I know it's a measurement. It's a measurement of the rate at which light travels or whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't care about how you define it. The point is that it's not defined or known merely by empirical investigation. But it's presupposed in the way humans interact in the world, right? We experience the world from beginning to middle to end. There's no human being on the face of the planet that experiences things in reverse, right? And we also experience and learn things within a spatial field, a visio-spatio-temporal field. That's how we learn things. There's not a human being on the planet who does it in a different way. We are beings constituted such that we learn things in a spatio-temporal field of vision, right, in the here and the now. Well, how do you prove that empirically? You can't. It's an assumed transcendental precondition of knowledge.
In philosophy, titled things like transcendentals. They're things that are assumed for the possibility of reason or logic at all. And if you were to deny any one of these, you would actually undercut and negate the possibility of logic or philosophy or reasoning or meaning.
Well, I'll tell you right now, there is no meaning. Logic is just a human invention used to explain concepts in a consistent fashion, and philosophy, well, I think we all know how I feel about philosophy. Makes me mad. You would still have to prove which God done it, which you can't because none of the umpteen zillion God boys have any concrete supporting evidence whatsoever. And until you do, I'll stick with the knowns. There is a universe. The universe contains the things that we know. The universe probably did them. Now let's all go play some video games instead of starting wars about fake gods. Okay, thanks, bye.
Bundle that doesn't stand on its own. How do we justify those things? Do we just say that they are?
Yes, because you can. Where did I say it just is? You quote me, but for the life of me I can't find where I said that. Yes, because you can. Saying it just is gibberish, non-argument, and in a debate is called ad hoc rescue. I don't care if Jay has refuted this shit over and over. He explained his ideas poorly in the video I covered, and it's obvious on the face of it why it is incoherent. Also, where did I say it just is? You quote me, but for the life of me I can't find where I said that. And everything is a dildo joke. That's why they call me Sir Sick, the classy crusader.
The mind of God is the basis, the ground for these things. And although it may sound kind of counterintuitive, it is, you can logically show this.
I'm sick of the sight of you. And we are still only on your first best-worst argument. Philosophy, eh? I can dig it. I mean, it's all 99.9% staring wistfully into the air, occasionally saying, why? And then going back to not having a real job. Jesus. I don't know how to end this video, so I'm just gonna go and get super philosophical. I'm kidding. I already am. Dyer did the big sad about my response and decided to share it with his followers. I don't take anything or anyone seriously, and the more seriously you take yourself, the funnier it is. I'm not gonna start my car anymore because it makes a loud, sexy noise. Makes no sense, bro. Just debate him, for fuck's sake. No wonder you give yourself an out by saying you dislike debate. You wouldn't be able to defend your worldview at all if this is how you think. So, you won't debate him because you think he's annoying? That's like saying, I'm not gonna start my car anymore because it makes a loud, sexy noise. Makes no sense, bro. Just debate him, for fuck's sake. Forgetting that that's not what I said, how is a sexy sounding car and talking to someone even remotely... We take you seriously? Really? He's offering to pay people to debate. What is he, 5? I'm not suddenly going to do something I think is completely asinine just because there's a potential for a relatively paltry gain, especially considering the sheer amount of nonsense I would have to put up with to get it. Nah, mate. And again, I just wouldn't. This is like me challenging a teetotaler to a drinking contest. Also, you are a drawing! Haven't heard that one before. Like that's actually an argument against what I'm saying. You know, I get the you don't show your face shit all the time. Like these people genuinely believe a face somehow makes arguments more correct. How the hell would that even work? Secondly, cherry-picked. I literally use 95% in-context footage from his video like I do with all my videos almost to a fault. And the only thing that I ever skip is usually just prattle, because I've run out of things to make fun of in that prattle. Trust me, if I do that, it benefits everyone, including the subject. But people are humans, and humans are literally the worst things ever. No actual arguments here. Good job, bro. Way to actually defend nothing. Aw, thanks, buddy. I mean, you're wrong. I'm a fucking moron, but 'tis nice of you to say. It's a shame it's followed up by something else not true. I absolutely make arguments. That doesn't mean they're good, but if you couldn't tell when others could, I feel like that's not a me problem. And I'm using ad hom for comedy purposes, not as an actual point of contention.
And experience. The self. You cannot empirically demonstrate that you have a self. It's presupposed in all actions of cognition, communication, noetic energies, ratiocinations, etc. There's no test tube, no microscope that's going to show you the self. That words have meaning.
Has no meaning. If what you do has no meaning, what you're saying has no meaning. Lasai, I know you think that's a gotcha, but it ain't. That's just an accurate evaluation of the implication of there being no necessary meaning to the unibob. What I say has no meaning. What you say has no meaning. Everything is ultimately meaningless in the grand scheme of things.
And that they can convey meaning to other persons. It's another transcendental category. There's no empirical verification that you are transmitting the right meaning to another brain, another bunch of gray matter. It has to be assumed. The past. The past is a transcendental category that you cannot empirically prove exists or existed. It is assumed in the way that we as humans experience time and space and operate. Universals. Right? There's no empirical verification for universal categories, invariant concepts, numbers, etc., but that we know they exist. Ethics, right? Is the ethics under the rock? Where in the microscope, where in the test tube are the ethics? They are nowhere there. So they are assumed. These are just examples of things that are, and again, you can come up with more. But these are examples of transcendental preconditions for the possibility of even having knowledge at all.
I don't buy them. I think that they're horseshit, and I can see how they are. Maybe don't go around talking down to people when you might be out of your lane. Tag isn't God of the gaps. The latter deals with normative claims which posit God as a plausible cause in lieu of the narrow boundaries of empirical inquiry. I.e., this seemingly miraculous thing happened for which there's no current scientific explanation, therefore God must be the source. Tag is about establishing God as the necessary precondition of coherent experience, which is a foundational, paradigmatic state of affairs without whom existence would be inescapably absurd. God exists because of the impossibility of
in this world and operating in this world. None of these things are proven or known by empirical investigation. Are they related to empirical investigation? Yes. But they are presupposed in empirical investigation, and they are not the immediate subject of any empirical proof or investigation. So does that mean we cannot know these things or prove these things? No. That's where the transcendental argument comes in, because it is an argument based on the denial of any of these things as leading to absurdity. So when we come to the question of God and God's existence and the mind of God and the mind of Christ, etc., that I just mentioned in the Stephen Clark paper that I cited in my paper, we can ask another question. How do these different things relate to one another? Because our experience of the world is not chopped up into only having spatio-temporal relations without a self, right? No, that would be nonsensical. Spatio-temporal experience assumes a self that's having the spatio-temporal experience. And when we speak or write words that have meaning to convey that meaning to another chunk of gray matter in somebody else's head, it assumes that they have a self. It assumes that these words and these meanings are entering into spatio-temporal relations to convey that meaning, becoming mediums for information being conveyed from one person to the next. What it is to be a self is partly bound up with the past. I'm not an abstract category. I'm not a platonic form. I'm not the number 7. I'm a person who has a past, a life that began at a point in time. Part of my past is partly what makes me up, and you and everybody else, right? So there's no neutral kind of, I don't know what it would even be, like some abstract neutral self that doesn't have experiences. That's impossible, right? Universals, universal categories, universal laws of logic, universal in terms of predicates. These are presupposed in speaking. So the point is that when you just take a little sampling here of these kinds of things that are not like material things, and you say, well, these don't operate on their own, they all work together. Yeah, exactly. So how do they work together if there's not a God that holds them all together?
But your word salad is still as fresh as ever.
So let me frame it this way. So there's disciplines that are called meta-disciplines, right? Meta-ethics, meta-mathematics, meta-logic. These are real disciplines that people study. Now, one could say that they're not real disciplines and dismiss it or whatever. But when we talk about giving a justification or giving an explanation for things or explaining how they could be in the rest of one's worldview, I don't think that that's an invalid question. And you've said that you don't believe that it needs a justification. You could say that that's not arbitrary, but to me it sounds arbitrary. On the worldview where God exists, there's regularity in nature because of providence, because God has set the world up to be regular. And that's how we can do the scientific method. That's how we can do logic. That's how we can do math. The world operates in a regular way. But when we don't have that, and we just say that we only have our immediate sense experience, we only have what's pragmatic, then we're led to these foolish conclusions. Well, I would reply by saying that
you claim to be a proponent of the skeptical tradition, that you're within that tradition of skepticism. And I'm very read in that tradition, and I respect a lot of areas of the skeptical tradition. But whether we go back to Descartes and his meditations when he begins to question things, or whether it's Hume, or whether it's the more modern skeptics, they're very interested in questioning justification, questioning epistemic claims, questioning meta-level questions. They're asking all those meta-level questions. They're very interested in how we do or can't justify laws of logic, numbers, all those different things. So it's not unfair to bring those issues up, because they're the heart of the issue, especially in the history of epistemology. I mean, you can read an epistemology textbook that's common, Bonjour, something like this, and you'll find that the whole of the textbook is debates about coherentism and foundationalism and justifying claims. Now, one could say, I don't really care, or it doesn't matter to me, or whatever. But in a debate, what's presupposed is some question or some rule, right, by which we go by these rules to confirm or deny the case, right? And I think what you've missed, or tended to miss, is that the transcendental argument is not just an argument that's a reductio against some other position. It's a positive argument that's about all of those transcendental categories. And if those transcendental categories are actually necessary, and if they're actually very strong arguments themselves, then the argument for God itself is also strong, and it's also a positive argument. It's not just a negative argument about, well, I can find a flaw in your worldview, therefore mine's true. That's not the totality of the argument. The totality of the argument is that this worldview is coherent because I can look at all those different paradigmatic claims and preconditions, and they make sense, they're coherent. When I look at the system over here, and you can say I don't have a system, you can say, I'm not saying that you said that, but a person could say as a skeptic, I don't have a holistic system, I just have the best that I can go by with maximal certainty and pragmatic approaches. But that still has claims that are necessary and implicit about metaphysics, about epistemology, and about ethics. Even if you don't want to go down any of those specific routes, it still has a necessary implication. If I were to say I'm a total skeptic and I don't think that I know anything is true, that's still a claim about metaphysics, about ethics, and about epistemology, even if I don't want it to go there. It is pretty consistent with a coherence type of view in terms of epistemology. So I would say that if one makes a fundamental paradigmatic flaw in one's epistemology, then their worldview and their system completely breaks down and is incoherent. Like, for example, if I say, I don't believe that there's an external world, right, or something like this, this would be so fundamental. If I don't believe that there's logic, right, that would be so fundamental that our whole system would collapse. And again, historically, nobody's had a problem asking, can we investigate and justify these kinds of claims? And I know that Matt's not saying that you can't ask those things, but he's saying that he's not convinced that there is a need to justify those kinds of claims and those kinds of positions. And again, I still think that it's arbitrary to say that I don't know and they don't require it, because if you're going to utilize things, if you're going to believe in things and act as if those things are the case, there's nothing wrong with me in a debate asking for the justification for those kinds of things, because it's the same kind of question that you would ask about a theist. Now, the argument is that, and Matt many times said, but you're saying that God is circular and you don't have to give a justification for God. I'm saying that God is the justification for God is the transcendental argument, and all systems ultimately are circular at their root. Yes, absolutely, because you can never ultimately get past some final authority, right? But to say that that's not an argument, as I think just flatly incorrect. It is an argument. It's a transcendental argument, and transcendental arguments are valid arguments. Now, again, one could deny that, but the fact that if we deny transcendental arguments leads us to absurdities, that's the reductio, right? And that would prove that they are valid arguments in a logical sense, if something leads to a reductio.